Well, welcome back. It is uh, number two of our game designers workshop, I guess you want to call it. So I'm creating a series of game designer specific videos that discuss how to create missions, things to look out for. I went through quite a bit in the first video, but I kind of really moved through it quick. My goal was to get to a scenario that I could start and play, and you could see the AI utilizing the objectives and things that we've set up. So I think I'm going to slow it down a tiny bit and just concentrate more on the different types of objectives, right? Because I think that's probably what most people want to understand. So we'll get right to it. Um, let's see. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to be very, very generic, right? So I'm going to create an allied AI template, and then I'm going to have it create like all of the basic um, objectives, and we'll kind of go through those, and then we'll start adding advanced kind of objectives. Okay, so you guys can understand how those kind of work. You can understand about the weighting and the priority and all the things that you probably want to know when you're setting up a mission. All right, so from any if you're creating something for allies or creating something for uh, the Soviet side, you have to always create them from another piece that is of the same side, right? So we talked about before about whenever you're thinking about scenario design, the first thing you probably want to do before you do anything is you want to establish the allegiances of the forces, right? So right now, this is the base default setup for the Caribbean map. In it, we have Cuba and Nicaragua are already allied Soviet. Um, Everything else, other than the United States and its European allies, are basically set to be neutral. Okay, so what that means is, Panama is aligned to the United States. The Dutch at Curacao, um, Grenada, I have down as just already aligned to the United States, but there's no forces there. But it is the use of. But you could set this to be. You could align it to neutral if you wanted to. Martinique, since it's considered France, Antigua. This is by default in the Caribbean game. It established this as allies. So anyway, so I've basically just done that. And of course, Puerto Rico and Florida are U.S. If you notice on these single map things, I also try to give you the ability to add units that are not on the map. The only way you can add something for a country is if there's an actual location that is of that country, or it's the default, primary country of that side, right? So no matter what, any United States or Soviet Union would always be creatable because you can create them at any um, location that is of that side. I also give Argentina, Brazil, Canada, Chile, China, Mexico, and Peru. I put in China just because, if we want to use this map for something like later times, I'm thinking, you might put the Chinese down in Nicaragua or something like that. But anyway, all right. So I think I've discussed that part enough. So let's get to actually creating the objectives. So from Guantanamo, I'm going to hit create. I'm going to choose logic. There's a bunch of different types. You notice there's two new ones called VP marker and info marker. I'll show those if we have time. But I'm going to go ahead and create an AI template. That AI template object is like super powerful. I've added a lot of functionality that's all tied to this AI template that'll help construct your scenario well. So I'm just going to name it, allies. You don't have to really name it anything, but I just don't like looking at those big long names and stuff. So I'm gonna scoot it over here in the corner, and then what I'm gonna do is to make things easier. What you can do is you can pick specific zones as so the zones that you create, um, the zones that you say are covered by the AI template are basically what you're establishing as like the mission area. Okay, the Caribbean map's pretty small. There's really no reason ever to really concentrate on a smaller area than the whole map. So what I'm going to do for the AI template is the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the whole theater to coverage. So instead of picking specific zones, I'm just going to pick the whole theater and just make that part of its coverage. All right, so now you see every hex on the map is covered. All right. So because of that, because it's set like that, then let's go ahead and just create our baseline objective objects. So because I've now established this coverage, the logic basically figures out, okay, it says, hey, there's certain types of objectives I want to create. I'm going to look at what the coverage is of this AI template, and then I'm going to make some assumptions. I'm going to say, hey, for patrolling, I'm assuming that you might want to have a patrol of every single zone. So you might want to have a very specific patrol objective that's just that zone, just in case you want to segment out certain zones for patrol. Again, what it creates here are just simply building blocks. You don't have to use them. You can clone them and slightly alter them. You could even alter the direct ones, right? It's your purpose, right? But just it'll always try to create the same types of objectives. All right. So one thing I forgot, and I mentioned this in the last one. Before you tell it to create baseline objectives, you want to make a decision. Is this going to be the vast majority of missions where you set like objectives where ships will reach those and they just get taken away when they reach those, or are you going to create a mission where you want to actually land troops and have like things change hands in that regard? In other words, if you're going to turn on the garrison war, which is what we're going to do, because I'd like to show you all of those objectives and go through them in detail. All right, so I'm going to go up here to the game options, and I am going to say, I mean, these are things you probably should set up, like game turn limit. I'm just going to I'll pick a week, 21 turns. Garrison combat. All right, and we went through this before. I'm just going to set it to the basic zero defense with simulated combat, right? So in other words, it conquers when the defender gets to zero using a simulated combat versus the strict, as long as the attacker has 2 times the defense, he wins. Okay. All right, so we're going to choose that because I like that one better. And we'll say done. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to create these baseline objectives logics. All right, so just created a bunch in this same thing. So let's start going through these and start understanding how things work. Okay, so your basic one that most times you're going to want to have for any type is patrol. So we'll go with, so it creates, what it does is it creates a patrol per zone. Then it creates a patrol for all the zones that you said it has coverage about all together as one. And then it has one just saying, hey, I want to patrol the entire theater, whether you said it was part of the coverage or not. Okay, so that means that in this case, likely the patrol mission and the patrol theater, which is Caribbean theater, they're probably covering the same things, which they are. Okay, um, so let's take a look at any one of these. Let's look at one of the. Um, Notice it also creates replenishments for all the different countries it finds hexes for or for ports for. It just assumes you might want to have that, right? So if you have, um, you know, on the Caribbean, it's kind of weird, but anyway, but it just does it, right? So you can use these, you can create new ones if you want, but we'll talk about replenish in a second. Let's first talk about patrol, and I'll start with patrol the Puerto Rico zone. All right. So what are the things we can see about this? All right, so it's a patrol objective. It's not priority right now. So what does priority mean? Okay, so in order to understand priority, you have to understand the way that the game engine uses weights of objectives to determine what the AI does. Okay, so um, each ship, each unit, each aircraft will likely have multiple objectives linked to them. Okay, now how does it determine what it does? So what it does is it is a couple of factors. One is if any of the objectives are established as priority, then as long as one of those or many of those that are priority apply, it will limit its choices to the priority. Okay? So if you give it 9 different objectives, but 3 of them are priority, it's never going to pick the 9 objectives, the other 9, the 6. It's never going to pick them if uh, 3 of them are priority, because it'll always pick between the 3. Now, it doesn't necessarily always apply for the 3. Okay? In other words, there's rules, there's certain types of logic that the game uses to say, hey, there's no reason for this to pick up that objective, so it doesn't even qualify for that objective. So the only way it would not pick a priority one for that particular type of ship is um, if it doesn't qualify for those. Okay. Now, what I just described is how a single ship or a single aircraft determines what its objective is. Each unit category, which is either air, sea, or sub, act a little differently in this way. So subs are always lone wolves. They never compare their objectives to other things in the same hex. They never compare their actually air and subs are basically all lone wolves, right? So their determination of what objective they pick is purely alone for that particular unit. So that means you have 5 or 6 units at a base, at an airfield. What one picks doesn't affect the other. But surface ships, because surface ships can be combined into groups, they do a comparison. So in other words, let's say you have 5 ships in a task force, and each of them have some amount of these objectives. They will use the number one. Each one of them will pick between whether they have priorities or non-priorities, and always pick the priorities first. And then within the priorities or the non-priorities, they will compare the weights. And for a single ship, since the single ship always has the same value, it uses the VP value of the ship in comparison. So when a single ship is trying to make a determination, it doesn't really matter, right? Because the commonality between all the choices is itself. So there's nothing for it to compare. So all it uses to compare is the weights. And the way it works is if one is set at priority weight 2 and another objective that is also in the same class as either being priority or not is weight 1, then that means it has and assuming it qualifies for both of those objectives, that it'll have a 66% chance of picking the 2 and a 33% chance of picking the 1, right? It just uses math and it just puts it all into a random assortment, and then it picks off of those based on how weighting they are. Okay. Now, all that does is say, okay, now I picked an objective, so that's my candidate that I bring to the party. Any other ships that are also in the same hex that are also trying to pick their same objective, right? Some ships might be in the same hex that already have an objective, and they're part of a group, and that group is on its way, right? So it's not like you're going to just necessarily just pick up a bunch of ships that happen to be in the same hex. But if they're all sitting there wanting to get an objective, then the way surface works is it groups them all together, okay? And so if you have five ships in a task force, one has priority weight 2, or I'm sorry, one picks this patrol, another one picks a grouping, another one picks a destroy base. Well, then it says, okay, then now I'm going to compare all the ships together, and I'm going to throw them all into a bucket, and I'm going to weight each of those objectives by the VP values of the ships that are picking them. Okay, so, and it also compares it by priority. Okay, so that's some key things there, right? So, in other words, if you give your carrier a certain set of objectives and you have a couple of escorts with it, most of the time, what the carrier picks is probably going to be what everybody does, and everybody else just kind of tags along. Um, Amphibious assault ships or transports, ships that normally pick priority, priority true objectives, they'll usually win out. Okay, in fact, I think they'll always win out. right? So even when you compare against multiple ships, if one of the ships in that group picked a priority one, then that's what they're going to pick. Now, if multiple ships pick different priority ones, then they'll do that comparison again within those priorities by looking at the weights and the VPs of the VP values of the ships that are compared, right? So all you really have to understand there is in general, higher VP value ships usually win out when choosing something, but it depends. It is a comparison, right? If there's like 20 other ships in the hex, then a very high VP ship, its choice may not win, right? Because there's so many other options that it could go with, right? It's thrown into the weight of the whole population. Priority ones will always win out. Now, what do we use as priority? We usually don't set patrol to be priority. Priority patrol is a type of mission that is kind of like a background mission, right? If it doesn't have something more important to do, it's going to patrol. And if it decides not to patrol, then it'll do something that's even generally less important. Okay? So you kind of layer it. So what I usually do is, so let's talk about, before we talk about that, let's talk about what patrol does. Okay, so what does patrol do? All patrol simply says is, um, when if something picks up a patrol, if it's outside or inside, it doesn't matter. It's going to try to move somewhere in here, and it's going to move toward a particular hex in here, and it's randomly generated based on what the coverage is. This one would use all these hexes as equal chance that it's trying to go to. Now, while it's on patrol, it could, before it makes it to the location it's trying to get to, it could get distracted by a enemy sighted. When it actually gets to the location it's trying to get to, it will at that point pick another location. So essentially it's just going to go here, then it's going to pick another random location, then another random location. It's just going to keep going until it either decides to stop patrolling, which I'll get to in a second, or it's interrupted by an enemy that is sighted within this patrol. Now, there is a concept of, let's say I give a ship a patrol in the Puerto Rico zone and the Windward Passage zone. Okay. Now, if it chooses out of the two, and let's assume it has other objectives too, but out of it, what it ends up deciding is it ends up deciding it's going to pick the Puerto Rico zone. So when it picks the Puerto Rico zone, there's a chance every turn that it would also consider Windward Passage when looking for things to intercept. Okay, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes for that turn, I think it determines it each turn, and same thing with aircraft, right? If the aircraft has multiple patrol zones, it'll pick one patrol zone, right? But if an enemy is sighted in and it's if it determines that it can stray from its patrol zone, then if any of those patrol zones have an enemy sighting, even though it's tagged to this, it might switch orders and start patrolling Windward Passage if an enemy is sighted. Basically, just make it a random occurrence that they're predestined, I guess, to change if they need to, right? So if you don't care about all that logic, then you just give them one patrol zone that covers all three, right? If you think they're all equally important and you don't really need to keep things separated by zones very particularly, because if you do separate it by zones, that means there's chances that you might have a guy patrolling the Puerto Rico zone, something shows up in Windward Passage, and the AI decides not to go over there. Okay, but if you um, make all three zones part of the same zone, then anything that happens in there is always going to make it react. Now, you may think, well, what if my guy's all the way over here on the right, and I have a patrol zone that is all the way over here in addition, right? And an enemy gets sighted here. Am I going to travel all the way across the map in order to go there? Yes, if nothing else interrupts it. But even while it's going on it, it's constantly checking and it's always looking for the nearest enemy sighting that is near its position. That means, let's say we have a bunch of ships all searching these three zones, and something gets sighted over here in Santiago. If I have a submarine over here, the submarine is going to start trying to make its way to Santiago. But if another ship is detected here, that immediately in the processing, that sub would then vector and go to the nearer one, right? So yes, you could draw everything one way by having something get detected, but if other stuff get detected, it immediately starts picking the next things. Okay, now it could also decide to stop patrolling, and it'll stop patrolling in a couple of ways. One is if it runs out of the necessary things it needs to patrol, right? So it checks to see if it's, say, for instance, it runs out of all ASW, AA, and SSM ammo. Then it knows it's going to probably it's going to probably change to a replenishment objective. Okay. It also has the concept of the longer that a ship is on a particular patrol mission against a particular patrol objective, even if it's moving around here, as it's moving around here, it's built, a number is getting incremented for how many cycles essentially it's using on that patrol. And the longer it stays on that, the more chance that the logic says, all right, I know you've been using this patrol for a while, but go ahead and stop. And then it tells it to pick something else. Now it may end up just picking the same thing all over again, but at least it gives it a chance to um, to change. Okay, and every time it's told to clear its orders, it does the whole calculation over again of what thing it should be able to pick up. Okay, so I think we explained patrol pretty well here. Patrol, there is some there's some additional logic about patrol, like for instance, if you're aircraft, if aircraft cite a particular thing, it does if it has SSMs, for instance, if it's armed with SSMs, then it won't necessarily try to go right to that hex. It'll try to get to either it'll try to get to either its range away from that target, or it will start getting close. I mean, it'll pick either 3, 2, or 1 hexes away. It usually won't pick the 0 hex if it doesn't need to. If it's on a bombing mission, though, it will try to go to that actual hex. So I put that kind of logic in there. So all that is what the automated AI does. All right, so let's talk about the next type of objective, or let me look through here. What are all these other things? All right, so for patrol objectives, you probably are never going to set it to priority. I use a base priority weight of 2. I think that's a good middle ground one. It gives me enough things, it gives me enough weights below 2 that I could put things that are less likely to be picked up to patrol, but it still leaves all the way up to priority weight 10 for me to put even more important things that I want to do. Okay? Normally, patrol, you're not going to have any of these things else set. You won't have remove unit when complete, remove link when complete, which I'll get to that when we talk about like transits and loads and things like that. And there's usually no removable ward. We usually don't want these visible to all either. The only types of missions that we want to visible all are usually ones we also set to be priority. It doesn't have to be, but usually, um, usually ones that are set to be visible all are also set to be priority. Priority just means that the AI will pick those above all others. Visible all means that both sides can see the objective on the map. Okay. And for this objective, patrol Puerto Rico zone, I have given the ability to add things like, let's say, for patrol, there's not really a whole bunch else to say here, but I could click on patrol Puerto Rico zone, and I could put down here um, for anti-sub for ASW ships primarily. I mean, I'm just putting. There's no reason or rhyme why I'm putting what I'm putting, right? Don't this patrol zone is not in any way very specific for ASW. I'm just using it for a way that you could put some information there. Now, since this, since this objective is not going to be visible to all, there's really not a whole lot of reason to even add any additional language on this. Okay? The whole purpose of me being able to put up to 5 lines of description for objectives is if they're going to be shown to both players. Because what the whole point is you put that kind of information in so that very early on, when you're reviewing the map, you can get better information about things. Okay? All right, so let's see what else. Um, I would say just play around with these. I would say if it use clone. If let's say you set up one that's very that you want to repeat and create other ones that are very much like it, you can hit clone. That'll create another one that is just like it with basically all of the same attributes. It'll just give it a new ugly name. Clone for enemy. Usually, I used to use that a lot for before I created the ability of automatically creating a bunch of objectives. I would use the clone for enemy because I wouldn't want to have to click a bunch of hexes. So I would create one that covers like the entire area, and then I would clone for enemy because it makes sense, right? Both the U.S. and the Soviet side would both probably have generic patrol orders to cover the whole theater, right? There's no reason to um, do the duplication of a lot of work. You could just hit clone for enemy, and it'll create one for the other side. You could also use it to create ones for the same side. Like for instance, usually your grouping and your patrol objectives should have the same coverage, right? Because and then we'll talk about that. Let's talk about groupings real quick. Uh, All right, so notice I don't put a bunch of specific groupings because I've never seen the need to create very specific groupings. But if we look at grouping mission area, okay, so what is a grouping mission? Notice its weight is much less. It's 4 times as less likely for you to be picking it than the patrol. Okay, it's usually never priority, and it's never visible to all. Grouping is just like kind of like a kind of an infrastructure objective that you need that that gives you the ability for ships eventually to clump up into task forces, right? So if you have a bunch of different, let's say ships split up because one ship had to go off to get replenished. Well, it's now split off from a task force, and it'll never be part of a task force again. Again, I'm talking about through the AI. It's never going to be picked up by, never going to be put into a task force again unless it happens to get lucky and it happens to be in the same hex as another ship that's trying to also figure a mission at that point. But what the grouping does is the grouping kind of helps that out. What the grouping does is the grouping says, hey, if I switch to grouping mode, then I'm not looking for enemy, I'm looking for friendlies. And I'm going to start moving and try to link up with other friendly surface groups. And grouping, when you're on grouping, you don't get distracted by enemy. You can shoot at enemy as you're passing, but you're not going to change course to go toward enemy when you're on grouping. You're just going to go and try to get into the same hex as another friendly. And when you get into that hex with that other friendly, then I think at the end of the cycle, it will merge. If one of the groups is grouping and the other one is not grouping and doing something else, they'll just merge together into the non-grouping task force. Okay, so that's what grouping does. So it's basically it gives some ability and you always want it and there's really no reason to make it very specific. So I always generally always treat grouping to be like because all you're really doing is saying, hey, if I see ships in any area on this map, I'm going to go toward it. Okay. And normally those ships will all be in a patrol zone, correct? Right? I mean, because that's generally the mission area that you're going to be in. So it usually doesn't make sense to make very small grouping areas. All right. Um, so again, I keep grouping priority very low. I usually don't do any of the remove unit or remove link or remove low ward. They're never visible to all. I never do it that way. And that's about it. All right. So let's look at the next type. Let's look at replenish. Okay, so we'll go to replenish USA ports. All right, so replenish USA ports. Um, hmm, that's interesting. I'll have to look at this. I don't know why it selected Nakaro and all these. I'll have to check that out. What it's supposed to be able to do is check any base that might be part of its side. So there must be a little piece of logic in here that for some reason it's picking these guys. I'll look at that real quick, but it should not have picked these guys, and I don't know why it did. What it should have only picked is Key West, Guantanamo, Puerto Rico, um, and any of these other ones. I think, yeah, looks like it. Now, yes, that's a bug, and it shouldn't have done that, but it really has no effect on things because when a when a ship chooses a an objective, it looks at the covered areas and um, it limits it by what it really actually can go to. So in other words, let's say that the carrier group is sitting right here, and the carrier group finally it runs out of ammo, and it says, "Hey, let me go on a replenishment mission." It's not going to pick this port because before it picks the objective, it does a quick look and filters out all the locations that don't make sense. So, in many ways, you could make these objectives cover very large amounts of area, but the logic will filter out all the stuff that doesn't make any sense, right? Like I could have made this replenish cover the entire theater. It doesn't really matter. I'm just the reason I don't is because it takes the processing power more to filter out all the things that it shouldn't use, right? So, so for instance, on this one, right, since it's a USA, since it's an allied side, it would only pick allied hexes. Now, assigning it to neutral countries makes sense, right? Because theoretically, that neutral country might be aligned to the Americans during the game because the Soviets declare war on it. And at that point, maybe you'd want that port to be available for it to replenish. Okay, so either way, this is the default it does, and you can of course, if you don't like this, right? If you're saying, hey, listen, no, under no circumstances am I going to want U.S. ships, even if Jamaica is aligned to us, you can go here and you can just say remove this hex from coverage, and now it doesn't cover it. Okay. You could also take what the automation created, and you could also just say clear all locations. Boom. So now nothing's picked. So now I go up here to Key West. I say add this hex. I go down to I go to Roosevelt Roads and I hit add hex. And let's say that's it. Okay. Um, Probably would make sense that Panama Canal probably, but you can make the determination. Again, what the automation creates is a suggestion. It's just all it really is to save you some time because it takes a long time to set up all these objectives if you had to do it manually. So this just does it for you. All right, so that's for replenishment. Now, notice replenishment doesn't have a priority weight at all. I think I talked about this on the last mission. It doesn't have a priority weight at all because the way the logic is set up for objectives, there's no way it could pick a replenish objective or something else. It'll never have to choose between replenish and other objectives because once it needs replenishment is the only replenish objectives are the only ones that qualify for itself because the logic it uses to say, hey, what what objectives qualify for me? So it doesn't even need to have a priority weight because it's kind of on its own. So I leave that as 0. I usually don't clone those. If I wanted someone to know, I could make it visible to all, right? So that um, it's sitting in a spot so that I don't know your enemy might know. Oh, this is where they're gonna replenish, but it doesn't really make sense. If there's what you would be better served with creating like an info marker in that area, saying something like, "Hey, expect the enemy to be in this area. This is their home base area," right? You could use a VP marker or an info marker for that kind of thing. So we still haven't run into a type where you want to use um, any of these priority or removals or visible to all. Okay. All right. So we've done replenishment, and the way replenishment works, I did mention this on the last one, right? When you qualify a replenishment, it'll then just pick the nearest. It'll just pick the nearest port to itself to go replenish. Okay. And what it'll do is it'll travel there, and it will get to the location. And when it gets to the location at the beginning of a turn, so in other words, if it's traveling down here Let's just go and create a ship so I can move it around and explain it. We'll create a little. Oh, I love my Iowas. So we'll create the New Jersey. All right. So if the New Jersey is over here, and New Jersey has a length of 4, then let's say it runs out of stuff, so it needs to go back to base. Okay, so turn 8, it starts its movement. It gets here. All right. Now turn 9, it starts. It's still not at port, so it won't replenish. Turn 9, it moves 1, and then it essentially stays there for the rest of that turn. Now turn 10, when turn 10 begins, it docks and starts replenishing. Turn 11, it'll come off dock and be available to be activated. And the AI would normally then just activate it. Okay? So that's the way replenish works. Once the thing has all the stuff it needs, like it has its fuel and has its ammo, then it doesn't qualify for replenishment over, so it won't pick replenishment. It'll pick everything else. Okay? All right. What else we got? All right, so let's talk about destroy base, etc. Okay, so we have different types of objectives. Now, destroy base, looks like I did my logic right. It picked all of the enemy bases on the map as a default. Okay? Now, destroy base is very generic. As long as there's a base that still isn't destroyed here, some part of it, either airfield or port or close defense, those are counted as bases as well, then it has targets. All right. Now, for destroy base, and for any of the destroy facility type things, there's 4 different versions of it. There's a destroy base, destroy port, destroy airfield, destroy close defense. If you're not being very specific, then you'll just use destroy base, right? For I think big World War III scenarios, I would just leave it as destroy base, right? Just very generic. It'll always have a wealth of objectives that it could, a wealth of things that it could destroy. On many of the smaller scenarios, there's usually just a need really to, with smaller scenarios, there's no real reason to really mess up anybody's ports because, yeah, so it doesn't really affect the short game, right? Because ports really only matter for big grand strategic games because you don't want ships having the ability to replenish or whatever. So most of the time, for like shorter scenarios, I'll use instead of a destroy base, I'll use a destroy airfield. Luckily, this thing creates ones of all of those. Okay, so air cruise missile only. All right, what does this do? Well, I wanted to give the ability to say, hey, okay, let's talk about a Perry class frigate. A Perry class frigate has no cruise missiles. It's got one tiny little gun. In fact, let's create it so we can actually look at it. And let's zoom in a little bit. Let's zoom in a little bit so we can see some stuff. All right. Why do I use that? Okay, so here let's create a Perry so I can show you a point here. We'll use the Crommelin. All right, so well, Perry's not an absolutely fantastic example of this, but okay. So what do we know about destroying bases? How do you destroy bases? There's only 2 ways of destroying bases. Well, there's 3 ways to destroy bases. You can either cruise missile it, you can either bomb it. This guy can't do neither, right? He can't cruise missile it because he has no cruise missiles. He can't bomb it because he's not an airplane. But he can use close combat on it, which means he could travel all the way to it, get into it, and start busting it up. Now, what is he going to use to attack that? He's going to use guns and helicopters. Now, at best, at full speed, at full health, this one's actually set up pretty nicely because he's one that has like 2 helicopters. Plus, he's got his 76 millimeter. He has 6 points of close defense. Why do I say 6? Mark, you're pointing to a number called 14, but you're saying 6. Well, I'm saying 6 because for battling against bases, you use only the portion of your close combat number that is not your SSM value. Okay? So you don't use SSMs against bases. If you're fighting other ships in close combat, then you do use 14 points. But if you're going against a base, you're only using guns and helicopters, so you're only using 6 points. Okay, so by setting that objective to, where did I put it? I can't remember where I put the darn thing. Anyway, the destroy base one. Um, okay, now I'm lost. Help me. Is this it? Oh, destroy. Yeah. Okay, destroy base. Okay, great. So, so for destroy bases, uh, you could set it to be air cruise missile only. So what does that mean? Number one, when you assign it en masse, it only gets assigned to ships that, or units that can. So only air units would get this type of destroy base mission, and or anything that has cruise missiles. So the Iowa would get it. Submarines would get this, and ships that don't have those long range things will not get it. And why do you want that? Because I may not want the objective, right? I may not want that Perry sailing all the way into Leningrad. Okay, I want it to only attack Leningrad from a distance. So if I only set it for ships that have cruise missiles or have or bombers that can reach out that way, then I would. I usually don't want surface ships tootling into enemy ports. But if I don't care about that, if it's a map where it does make sense that ships would get into that port up close and shell it, then you take off the air cruise missile only. But I put it on by default. Now, um, when you have a mission like this destroy base, the ships will start moving toward that area, like as if they're trying to attack it. The thing is once it runs out of cruise missiles or that base is destroyed, then it stops being on that mission. I'll use the New Jersey as a better example, right? So if the New Jersey is targeting this base and hits it with cruise missiles and destroys the port, and aircraft come in and destroy the airfield, then this hex will no longer be a valid target. So it'll recalculate and figure out, and it might pick the destroy base again. But destroy base is another one of those ones that has a timer on it, right? As time goes by, it'll do that thing for a little while, and then it'll probably pop out of that mission. Just like it uses the same logic as patrol. Okay, so by setting it to be essentially by setting it to be an objective that is cruise missile and air only, you're basically pretty much ensuring that your ships are not going to sail all the way up into the into the area and blast it, right? But if you turn that off, then obviously the New Jersey is going to have fun, right? The New Jersey is going to um, well, I mean, New Jersey would get that anyway because it has cruise missiles. But even if it didn't have cruise missiles, let's say it ran out of cruise missiles, and the objective was not, if the objective was turned off and it wasn't air cruise missile anymore, then New Jersey would still qualify for it, right? Because it has close combat, so it would then sail up and attack it. So that's how you can kind of do that. Now, again, you have to pick between destroy base, destroy airfield. If you want it very generic, just use destroy base. All right. I think we're about done with all your basic ones. All right, so let's talk about loads now. All right, so now we have one that we're using priority. Okay. Now this is a priority type, but and you may want to make it visible to all. Okay. So if in the mission parameters you're if it's a giant World War III scenario, then you probably don't want to make load visible to all, right? Because then all that means is the enemy is going to see that you could load from any of these bases. It's probably better for invades. Um, invades, you might want to make them visible to all. So I'm going to go ahead and create. I think I went through this before, but I'm going to go ahead and create some. Yeah, so let me show you how how this stuff works. Okay, so notice it didn't create any invades, it didn't create any um, unloads, and it didn't create any transits because you may not want those types of it. All it does is just creates all the ones that are very hard to put together. In other words, ones that usually cover a lot of hexes. That's going to take you time to create it. Transit you can create in like 3 seconds, so there's no reason for it to create them for you. If you need a transit, you'll create it. All right, so let's talk about the different ways of making ships do important things. Okay, so let's say this scenario is to reinforce Guantanamo Bay. All right, so then what we're gonna want, right? We're gonna want a let's create an objective. Objective. All right, by default it goes to patrol. All right, so let's go to a transit. All right, transit. All transit means is, and we'll say transit Guantanamo Bay, Guantanamo Bay, U.S. needs to reinforce um, ships. All right, can be removed upon arrival. VP multiple times 5. Bang. Okay, so now I got a bunch of information on it. All right, so if I put that information on it, most likely I'm going to set it to be visible to all, right? So now both players can see that there is a objective over here, head this hexa coverage, okay? And it, all right, so I wrote VP multiple of 5, but what makes it actual VP multiple of 5? Well, we're going to say, okay, so what happens when a ship gets here? So you normally use transits because you don't actually want it to land the troops. You just want it to get there to qualify for an objective. If you want it to land troops, then you set it to garrison war true, and you use the load, unload, and invade um, objectives. If you want to just simulate that, which is what most of the scenarios do, you're just saying, hey, I just wanted to get there, and then the ship will disappear. Okay? So for normal transits, what you're going to probably do is you're going to treat it as you're going to make it priority, right? So that means and the only ships that are going to pick up these transit, you'll want to make sure that you only give it to the ones that actually will disappear, right? So in most cases, that's like AA ships or transports or tankers or something like that, right? So you set up priority. Then you say, in order for it to give VPs, you're going to use a removal award amount. So I said 5, so we're going to move this up to 5 times. Okay. So what happens now? Uh, this VP won't get awarded unless something happens. Like usually, the way the logic works and the way so for AI, I think it needs to either be set to be remove unit or remove link for it to award VP. I think technically the AI doesn't really care about that. I think it'll reward it no matter what. But for you not to create if you don't have it removed, then your enemy or whoever has this objective is just going to start racking up the points like literally like 20 times a turn, right? It's going to constantly say, "Oh, I'm at the right place," and give me 5 times my VP. So what you do is you have to set it to remove so that it only does it once. Okay. So most of the time in most scenarios, you say remove unit when complete. Okay. And if I set up a transport, or let's say the New Jersey has to get there. Okay. So let's say I'm going to assign the New Jersey to have this objective. So I go New Jersey. I say create. Oh, I'm not create. I say link. I link it to Transit Guantanamo Bay. Okay. So now, all right. So if if I just did that, then the AI will move this guy here. When it gets here, and it doesn't have to be at the beginning of the turn. It's just whenever it gets there, whenever it reaches there, it will remove the ship, and it'll award 5 times the 12. You'll get 60 points for the New Jersey getting there. If it's a human playing, and we set this up, then it won't tell you anything when you get there. You'll just have to manually add the VP. Why? Because we didn't set the New Jersey to be removable during play. So For humans, okay, for human sides, you want to make sure that if you're saying remove unit when complete on the objective, then the ships that you assign that to, you want to make sure that they're set to removable during play. The combination of the ship being removable in play and it being in a hex with an objective that it's linked to that is also remove unit when complete will prompt you to remove objective ships when you get there. So if you're playing as a human and you get your forces there, you'll then be prompted in this menu up here to remove the objective ships. If if you don't want the ship to be removed, instead you want the link to be removed, okay? So let's see, why would we do that? Okay, let's say that this mission is to do a world tour of the Caribbean. The purpose of this mission is for the battleship Iowa or New Jersey to visit 5 ports of call without being destroyed. And it needs to and it well let's say it needs to go Roosevelt Roads and Guantanamo just for simplicity's sake. Okay, all right. So let's change some things around on our transit. We probably want to don't award them 5. We probably just want to award them 1 because that's just a whole lot of points for doing not a whole lot. Okay, all right. So he gets 1 times his ward there. Instead of saying remove unit when complete, we say remove link when complete. And then we also create, let's clone it. Now let's move it over here to Roosevelt Roads. Let's clear the locations because it copied that location from there, but let's add this back. Let's make some things here. We'll call it, um, yeah, we'll just say Puerto Rico. U.S. ships. Oh, no, let's be specific. BB, New Jersey needs to go here. Can be removed. No, not removed. Can only do once. VP multiple times 1. All right. So there's a difference between me saying can be removed when arrives to can do only once. Okay. So basically, what this is going to say is, so if this was AI, then what the AI would do, okay, is the AI would start here. The AI at the beginning of the mission would pick either. Okay, I haven't linked it to him, but let's assume I linked him. Well, let's just follow it, right? So you guys have something you can actually look at. All right, there we go. All right. All right, so now he's all right. So now the New Jersey is linked to these two. Okay. So when the game starts, he'll have some escorts with him likely. They're all gonna pick whatever he picks because he's likely gonna have the only one with priority tasks. He'll randomly pick either the Puerto Rico or the Guantanamo. You can weight them if you'd like, right? Right now, the Guantanamo one and the Puerto Rico one are both at priority weight 0, which is fine because they're the only 2 priorities. And if you think they're going to be about the same likelihood of you wanting them to pick it, then you do that. But you could make Guantanamo a 3 and Roosevelt Roads a 2, right? So that most of the time it's going to pick Guantanamo first. Either way, what the AI is going to do is it's going to decide about which one to pick. It'll move up there, and when the AI gets there, it's going to, instead of removing New Jersey, it's going to award the VPs, and then it's going to remove its link to that, so it never picks that objective again. Objective still stays there, but his link to that goes away. So then he says, well, now what am I doing? Well, the only thing left is this. So then he'd know he'd have to go here. I took the long way around, but you get it, right? When he gets there, he'll get awarded another amount of points, and then he'll clear that one, and then all he'll have left is whatever else you gave him, likely a patrol or a replenishment or a grouping. Likely you'll also have given the New Jersey, especially in this case, you'll likely have also given him a patrol, a grouping, and a replenishment, and maybe a destroy base as well, right? But he won't do any of those. He'll do these first. Now, you can if you want some variability in it, and you don't always only pick those, then I would not set those to be priority. I would just make them really high in percentages, or really high in weight, so that he generally always picks those, but doesn't have to, and he could easily stop doing that. That's the logic. Definitely ask me if you have any questions on that. Now, if you're playing it as a human, because you set it up this way, then when you get your, let's say you decide in your head, right, I'm going to go to here or here. Now, no matter what, since he's linked to both, if you move him here or you move him here, when he gets there, there'll be a message up here saying, um, award VP, award of, I can't remember what it says, award objective VPs or something like that. Okay, so that's slightly different than remove objective ships. So what that happens is it does exactly what the AI would have done. It awards the VP and then it removes the link to that thing. So then the next time, if you then sail away and then come back, it's not going to prompt you again because this ship isn't linked to that guy anymore. So then you'll have to take him over here to collect your things. Okay, so I think you following what I just said, I think you got pretty much the whole thing about those pieces. Okay, so now let's talk about load, unload, and invade, and then we'll finish up. All right, so there's a load here. Okay, so there's these. So essentially, load is important, right? But it's not always that important, right? If you don't want, if all you, let's say you start a giant scenario where the whole point is for a bunch of loaded ships to unload their cargo or to invade someplace. Okay, then all you really need is the unload and the invade because you never actually want it to go back to port to load up again. So you could set it up so that it doesn't have a load objective at all. That just means that when it's done, when those ships are done with invading and unloading, and they have nothing left to give, then they'll basically just follow whatever other ships are doing, right? If you create a load one as well, then it'll do a round robin. It will if it has troops on it, then it'll look to either unload or invade. Um, Now, how does all this stuff work? All of them work very similarly. Load and invade and unload all work the same way. The ship with that category, let's imagine this is a amphibious assault ship. If it has an unload or invade, well, if it has an unload, then it's only going to pick friendly owned bases that is part of its coverage. So it'll go to that base. When it starts the turn at that base, it will automatically take itself out. I'm talking about AI. The AI will automatically take itself out of the activation rotation. It'll be docked. It'll be unloading. Then when it's finished, the next turn, then it will pick a new objective. It can't pick the unload objective again because at that point now it's empty. So you can't unload if you're empty. So the only ones it would qualify for, it wouldn't qualify for invades either because it's empty, but it would qualify for a load if you gave it to. So then if it picked the load, then it would say, okay, let me load from all friendly areas, friendly locations that have at least 10 or at least it's like it's a special VP value if it has at least that many troops on it. And if it doesn't find any of those, then it doesn't pick it. But if it does, then let's say it says, okay, Key West, let's say we put a strength of 30 on it. So, okay, it knows, okay, I can come up there. Again, this is going to be an AA ship, not this Perry. So don't assume Perrys can carry troops. They can't. But if this was an AA ship, then it would go to here. Now it would do the same thing. It would wait till the turn that it actually starts there. It would go to loading. It would take its troops from the base. The base would go down by whatever, 8 or whatever it is its thing is. It would go up by 8. It would be full. Then it would look for a new mission, and it can't pick load again because it's loaded. So then it knows it has to pick. So by setting up load and unload, you'll have basically the ships just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Key things for those are the setting them all to be priority. Okay. Now, for invades, maybe invades you might set him to be visible to all, right? But again, I think it makes more sense to just not make the objectives. So let's say the whole point of this mission is to invade Kingston, right? So we would create an invade, and we'd create it, invade, and assign it to this location. Um, Now we probably also want to set an unload there too. Why? If you've been listening, then you'll know why. So uh, if you only give it an invade, the minute that this base changes hands, if there's other follow-on ships that are coming in there, it will no longer qualify for that because invade only means you're an enemy base. So the minute that this base changes hands, if you haven't given an unload, it will not be able to go to this base anymore. So lots of times you'll create an unload and an invade with the same coverage, right? Because you want to unload your troops there, but but um, you may want to segment out. Hey, I don't want to load there. I don't want to unload there if I own it. It's less important for me to do that. So what I would normally do is I'd create an invade and an unload that have the same coverage, same hexes, but I would set the invade to be much higher priority. So that means if all else being equal, it'll usually look for enemy targets versus friendly targets to unload. But sometimes you don't care. You want it to be the same, right? Like if your mission is to bolster the defenses at some place, then you probably want it to unload or invade um, with the same regularity. Okay, so if there was an invade at Kingston, then likely what I'd want to do. Let's see what I can do on Kingston here. If I click on Kingston, I can create a. Let's see. I think I can create a info marker right here. So I create an info marker. So I could put it like right here or something like that, just so you can see it. All right. Um, uh, Whatever. Okay, and realize this would never work with a neutral base, so you probably wouldn't want to set this to be this way. But you don't want to do it on neutral bases. Um, so let's just to be completely accurate. Let's make Jamaica aligned with the Soviets. Okay. All right. Um, this one says restore democracy in Jamaica. Okay. Um, U.S. ships will want to reach here. Um, yeah, that's it. Okay. So now you have yourself now you set this thing by default is always going to be visible for both players. Okay. So, um, so you have some options, right? The reason why I even say use a info versus um, using the objective is because I can set most likely in most large scenarios that use invades and unloads is you set the invade to cover like all the possible targets. So if you make the invade show up, then it kind of is distracting, right? Because the invade would only be over one of the hexes. It'll make you think, oh, I only want to go there. Instead, what you probably want to do is just create you'd want to create infos in certain areas, right? Like you'd create an info to say, invade Panama, invade Grenada, invade Cuba, right? And you'd put like three different infos, which you can show the information better than if you make the objective shown, because then the objective only shows up in one spot. Now, on the objective thing, you could say this objective covers all these different locations, right? But sometimes it's just better to have like little info markers here, okay? And just like an info marker is a VP marker, there's really no difference between a VP marker and an info marker other than the symbol. Okay, so really it's just giving you some flexibility on saying I'd like it to be an info, not telling you that you're getting VP for that. It might just be, hey, you don't get actually VP for that, but I want you to know that it's really important to do that. So you'd put an info marker down. All right. All right, so I think I've explained these objectives pretty well and how I would use these things to create missions. I'm sure there's other questions that you might have, and the best place to get those questions answered is joining our Discord. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had an amazing amount of influx of folks into the Discord that are playing the game. I've been doing a lot of tweaks and small bug fixes and new features for the folks, and it's awesome because now I'm hearing from players what stuff they want. So if you're really interested in playing this game, or interested in creating your own scenarios, please come to the Discord channel, and yeah, let's figure out. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it, and I'll see all of you in the next video.